should be one over there. Bais. No, down. Yehuda's got it.
So, yes.
Right there.
But you're right.
Okay. No books today? Bookless? One book.
What about your,
Should have more.
I
have mine over
You
here.
got it there, okay.
Yeah.
Orient me here in,
Okay. Again, a good Vach to everyone. Shavuot Tov. We are about to begin chapter 243, and that is the first of a series of 6 chapters that correlate to each other. So the major subject that we're about to begin is, in simple terms, Amir l'Nachri, having a Gentile do work for you on Shabbos. Now, there's a number of different subcategories or related subjects that we may not define exactly as Amir l'Nachri, but they do relate to the subject. And as I said, they're split in 6 chapters. This goes from Reish Mem Gimel, 243, until 248. I'm going to elaborate in a moment what each one of these chapters discuss. But before I do so, I'll just mention that these chapters are most commonly omitted, skipped when in a regular seder of learning Hilchos Shabbos. Most people learn Hilchos Shabbos just skip over this. I remember when I was learning in Kailul, and I just finished Reish Mem Beis, 242, I was starting 243, and I had a question. I went to the Reish Kailul. I won't mention his name, but a very chashuv Talmud Chacham, and I asked him a question. He said, "What are you doing? Just go straight to 249. What are you doing here? We don't learn this." I said, "Why not?" Like, do you know how complex it is? It's very complex information. So, what I can say is as follows. Okay, we will have an overview and different bits and pieces, and those things that are clear we will review. Other issues are, of course, the tchum are within the parameters of the Rav to Poskim on, because, as I say, these are very complex issues in a lot of situations that we will learn. So let me first give an overview of the chapters, and then we'll go into some case examples that we'll be covering, and then we'll go into this chapter itself. 243, Reish Mem Gimel, discusses renting a business to a guy. If I own a factory that produces clothing, okay, or a ketchup factory, can I rent it to a Gentile? The Gentile wants to make a 1-month run of ketchup, a 1-month run of clothing for himself, and he will work it on Shabbos. I mean, buddy, I'm renting it from you, I'm paying you good cash, I am opening it on Shabbos, of course, it's mine. Can I do that? Can I enter into an agreement to rent a business of mine to a Gentile if the Gentile will run it on Shabbos? Now, not all of us are business owners, so not for all of us is this a very relevant question. But for those who are business owners, these can be some very difficult questions, as we know that money is one of the greatest challenges to a Jew's obedience and a Jew's religiosity. That literally, if he closes it on Shabbos, he will lose a lot of cash. Not to mention possible loss of set customers throughout the week, because they now have a store open on Saturday and they just want to continue. So this is a very big Nisayan challenge, the topics discussed in these chapters. I'll mention a story I heard from Chabad Yosef's son, Bais Yosef. He said that once a group of business owners in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, whatever it is, came over to him and basically asked him to do a certain arrangement to allow the stores to be open on Shabbos. And bottom line was, we'll get into later maybe this particular case and why there wasn't a heter, according to his psak, Yosef's psak. And he told them, no, we can't do it according to halacha. And so what do? Like a lot of people do, they go Rav hopping. So they went to another Rav. And the second Rav did give them an arrangement, and he said that he later found out that the businesses owned by this group all went bankrupt. So these are, on the one hand, we have a real challenge to our Shabbos observance, where we can lose a lot of money by closing it on Shabbos. On the other hand, this keeping Shabbos may be what is going to keep the business intact. Pil Paritcher, chassid of the Tzemach Tzedek, one time he visited a city. He was a shadar, meaning he was a shliach, the Rabbanon, a mashulach that would go from town to town, not to raise money, but to raise souls and speak chassidus. And in one town, he saw something startling, that there were all the stores are open on Shabbos. And he made a meeting to discuss this, and they told him that they're more than willing to close their stores, but there's one very wealthy guy that he refuses to close it, and if he keeps it open, we're going to lose all of our business. So we can't. We have to keep up the competition. In any event, he spoke to this individual, this wealthy man, and the wealthy man said, "Who are you? Well, who are you? You just come here, you think you can tell people what to do. I'm not closing my store, you can forget about it." That Shabbos, he started feeling tremendous stomach pains, excruciating pains, until the point that he was screaming in pain. They called the doctors, no one knew what's going on. His wife became hysterical, thinking it must be because he offended this holy tzaddik with pillow. So she went to him on Shabbos. It was the middle of Shalosh Shudas, and he ignored her. And she came back again, and he kept on ignoring her until Shabbos was over. Once Shabbos was over, she said, "Please, we'll do anything, please, just, save my husband." So he said that Shabbos when Shabbos stops screaming, usually that's said on Shabbos by Kriyas HaTorah, where we say, instead of saying refuah shlema for someone, we say Shabbos imelizik. We can't scream, we can't supplicate to God on Shabbos, and consequently the healing will come on its own. We don't have to ask for it. But here he used a play of these words to say when Shabbos stops screaming at the transgression of keeping the business open on Shabbos, refuah shlema kreva, the refuah will come. So they had no choice. He agreed to close his business on Shabbos, and he was healed. So bottom line is that these are the complex halachas that are dealt with throughout these chapters. In chapter 243, it's specifically regarding renting the business to a guy and having a guy run it for you on Shabbos. 244 is having a guy do work for you, meaning as opposed to I have a business and he's running the business on Shabbos, I have a home I want built, the guy is building my home for me. He's going to do construction on Shabbos. We have here now mitzpei yamim. They don't work on Shabbos, but can they? Halachically, is it permitted for the Goyim to continue working on Shabbos on the project? If I'm building a shul, is it mutter for Goyim to continue building the shul on Shabbos? And so on and so forth. Can structures, buildings, homes, synagogues, etc., which are built for the sake of Jews, it can be continued to be built on Shabbos? The same applies. Can a guy work on an item of mine over Shabbos? Can I bring my cell phone in for fixing to a store? And they said, listen, the only time I have available to work on your phone is on Saturday. Is such a thing allowed? So these are cases of where someone's doing work for you on your object. That's in chapter 244, Reish Mem Daled, we're going to see. Another example that's explained there is regarding a dry cleaners. You bring in, you say, listen, I have a flight Motzei Shabbos. This is a very expensive suit. I have an important business meeting. I need it ready for Motzei Shabbos. I said, listen, buddy, we don't work on Saturdays, but I'll do a special favor for you. Is that allowed? Is such a thing allowed, to give it in without enough time for it to be done before Shabbos? 245 is where we have co-ownership between a Jew and a Gentile. A Jew and a Gentile own this business together. And there we're going to learn that as opposed to chapter 243, where basically it is almost always forbidden to rent your business to a guy and have him run it on Shabbos. If it's a joint ownership and he owns it and I own it, then there is more room for leniency. There's certain ways of circumventing the prohibition, and yes, having the actual store be open on Shabbos with the guy running the store and taking the proceeds, as we will discuss when we get to that chapter. It's in chapter Reish Mem Hey 245. This is the most common, by the way, for all business owners. They do this. A lot of Rabbanim have a shtar. This is called a special shtar mechira that they do with the gent. Sometimes, in order to allow the business to run on Shabbos, you really don't have a co-owner. You are the only owner, or it's a group of Jews. And what they would do is they would invite a Gentile, like they do mechiras chametz. They invite the Gentile to buy the chametz. So you invite a Gentile to buy your business, and he becomes a co-owner of your business, and that is a circumventing way of allowing the store to be open on Shabbos. That we're going to learn in 245. That's really one of the big chapters of Heterim that can allow a store to be open on Shabbos halachically. 246 is renting items to a Gentile. If I rent cars. Can I rent a car to a guy? And I know he's going to be driving on Saturday. He's renting it Friday afternoon. Can I rent him a car for Shabbos? And so on and so forth. All items of rentals or that you're lending to a Gentile that it will be used on Shabbos, is it permitted for it to be done? Chapter 247, Reish Mem Zayin, discusses mail. Discusses the post office, the mailman. Can you send a letter with a Gentile mailman? They continue to work on Saturdays. He may deliver it on Saturday. Is that allowed? He's doing a shlichus for you by delivering this envelope or this package. Is that allowed to be done? This is something that's relevant to everybody. We always make orders. Let's say we order from Amazon. They may deliver on a Saturday. And if so, or on a Jewish holiday. Let's say Saturdays, they mainly don't work, but Jewish holidays, they do work. It's not a legal holiday. So can I order it if there's a chance that it's going to arrive on Yom Tif? Okay, so that's 247 regarding sending things. And the 248, which is the last of this group of chapters, has to do with going on a ship over Shabbos, or going on a plane, or going on a train. Even though that's not the exact discussion, there are trains and planes for obvious reasons. It wasn't around when the chapter was written. Nonetheless, we do deduce those halachas regarding those forms of transportation from the discussion regarding ships. Okay, that's our overview. Some other subjects that will be discussed in connection to this is renting a home to a Gentile, or a warehouse, or a hotel, anything that the guy will be using over Shabbos, and he will do malacha in that home, in that warehouse, in that hotel over Shabbos. So you have many Jewish hotel owners, and you have many times groups of goyim who want to rent it for the weekend or whatever it is. And obviously they're going to be making use and cooking and doing everything they're doing on Shabbos. Is such a thing allowed? That's another case example. Or if you own a tzimmer and you're renting it to a guy, the guy's going to be using the electricity, he's going to be mechal Shabbos in your tzimmer. Is such a thing allowed? Another question we're going to be discussing is similar to the previous one, just regarding a Jew's mechal Shabbos. A non-frum, a non-observant Jew who desecrates Shabbos, is it permitted to rent to him or sell to him real estate property, or rent him a hotel room, rent him a tzimmer room, etc., anything of the sort? Once again, he will be using this area to be mechal Shabbos. Similarly, we find this question asked regarding even during the week. Is it permitted to rent a room to someone who's not from, who will be staying with a girl and they're not married? Or they are married, but they don't keep Tasa Mishpacha. Are you considered an affiliate, an accomplice of sinful activity that may take place in that room? It used to be protocol amongst many of the Jewish inns that they would not allow couples to sleep together unless they can show their ksuba. This I'm talking 300 years ago. If a couple wanted to rent in a Jewish inn, they wanted to rent a room together, they had to prove that they were married. If they didn't have proof of marriage, then they wouldn't be allowed to sleep together. Even the Baal Shem Tov, when he once came with his rebbetzin to an inn, he was separated from his wife. Didn't have proof. He didn't bring with him his papers.
In that case, I think the story was he only allowed if they had children.
If they had children. Okay. Bottom line is that they were separated. And that's how the famous story of Ibisro, of the Shpala Zayda, came out of that story. Another discussion we're going to have is stocks. Are you allowed to own stocks? In essence, we look at stocks, when we buy stocks, as just playing games and trying to make money. It's just making money. We're buying and selling like Monopoly. But in truth, when we buy a stock, what we are doing is we are handing over cash to the company. And that company then uses that cash, hopefully, to reinvest in their product and make it bigger and better, and we make money because the stock goes up. That's, in essence, what we do when we buy stocks. Now, so what happens is that we become a shareholder. We have certain, not for real legal purposes, unless you own a certain percentage of the stock, but even if you own one stock, you own a certain minuscule percentage of the company. is that a problem if this is a company working on Shabbos, which 99% of companies are probably doing some work on Shabbos, especially if we have a time zone difference. Even if this is a Shomer Shabbos company, but you live in Israel, they don't stop working when it's Shabbos for you. They stop working when it's Shabbos for them. So stocks is a very complex situation because a lot of times also you're buying not one specific stock, but you're buying a bulk of stocks. And in that case, you don't even know what's going on there. The stockbroker, he has 1,000 different stocks in the package that you're purchasing, and sometimes you have stocks of a company that company has sister companies that are also owned by it. So this stuff gets very complex. So we're going to discuss that in Mirz Shem also within this discussion. And last but not least, today in the 21st century, internet business sites. Many people today make their parnasa off a website that sells their product or tells about their product or provides a service. Is it permitted for that to remain open on Shabbos? So if someone sells books, such as myself, right? Am I allowed to leave my website open over Shabbos? Now don't forget, Shabbos is about 48 hours around the world. Close to 48 hours if you count from Hawaii. Well, that's the last one if you count from Guam. I think, no, yeah, Guam, I think is the first one. Guam, Japan, and all the way to Hawaii, you get about 48 hours. So do I have to keep my business closed on Shabbos for 2 days out of the week? That means only 5 days of revenue. Does it make a difference if a guy or if it's a Jew buying it? And what about if I don't have a website, but I have a product? I sell my product, as many people do today, through a third-party company, such as Amazon or eBay or anything of that sort. Now, they are open on Shabbos. They do take orders on Shabbos. And they used to get out of the issue of not working on Saturdays, so they have people all over the world working for them. That's why they have a 24/7 call service, because they have people all over the world in their workday working for them. And your order will probably be received and processed. I'm saying the order of your product will be processed. On Shabbos, does that pose a problem? So these are all of these modern day shilas that come up today, which of course were never around back then, and this makes business so much more complex. Business today has become a lot more complex from halachic perspective, and what the Poskim had to do was to scramble through all the different shuvas and responses and discussions in the Poskim and try to deduce from that how do we learn it into these case scenarios.
What about a website that doesn't actually sell, quote unquote, but you got a learning website and you're
right.
ultimately in the market?
So if it's a learning website, right. Chabad.org, however, they don't sell anything and they don't charge anyone to go on. If they charge someone for every article, you get 30 articles a month. So for every article, you're in essence paying. So can they do that? Can it be open on Shabbos? That's a good question. I think, is Chabad.org open on Shabbos? No. I've never tried.
There is a program out there that allows that it checks where you're.
Correct, I know, but the Chabad.org put on that program.
They used to. I don't know if they do now.
Did you ever check it?
It was a thing.
There are some websites where they don't have it so updated, so they will actually knock it off for like the 48 hours of Shabbos, or they'll knock it off just for the 24 hours of the United States, which of course doesn't prevent anyone from outside the United States. Don't forget, a lot of people live outside of the United States from being able to go on.
This website is set so that.
Your IP address, I know, I have a link to it. I have a link to a few different Shabbos keeping websites on my article on this.
Last night, went to Shabbos, so it was still Shabbos in America.
And it didn't work. Oh, it did work. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. A lot of them work on the IP address. So your IP address is listed, you know. Let's not be silly. That people today know everywhere where you are. You can go on Google Maps, and there's a setting there, if you know about it. It will track everywhere you ever were with your phone for the last 10 years. Everywhere.
Even if it's off.
The street, even the street you're on. So everything is tracked. Everyone knows where you are. There's no hiding anymore today. So, you know, they have a system which was created. They have a few different services that provide this. Some even provide it for free. Well, based on your IP address, they will close it for your Shabbos, for your Saturday. Now, when you get into Japan and Shanghai and all these areas, and Hawaii with a big machlekes, when Shabbos, when Sunday is, it's a big balagan, which day to close it on. any event. So, but do you have to have that? It's a question. Now, if it's an information service where I'm not actually selling product, there's no business going on, so I've completely avoided the business shiloh. But nonetheless, we still have a different shiloh, which is lifnei iver. If it's a Jew, I'm causing a Jew to go on the site on Shabbos, Shabbos. But once we're going in that direction, we can also say, Goyim are not allowed to learn Torah. You're making your site available for Goyim, lifnei iver, you're causing Goyim to learn Torah. So there's no end to this tripping up of people. So that it's a fair question, but I'm just saying we have to make the question in its entirety. But someone who would be charging for an actual article, like they have, George Orr has a website, and it's affiliated with JLI, that they provide halachic articles for payment. Like what I do for free, they do for payment. You have to pay for it. So in that case, with their situation, obviously they would enter a much stronger question regarding if that is allowed to be open on Shabbos. If you have some conservative rabbi who wants to give a speech in shul, or reform rabbi, and he says, oh wow, there's a great article here that I can use. It costs me, $10 to download the article, so I'll purchase it right now. That's a much stronger question. I don't know what they do or don't do. I'm just giving an example.
Ads are generating money for the website owner.
And the ads are running on Shabbos. Right? Yeah, so that's the question. All questions can be questions. The question of what the answer is. So we're going to get to that. These are all things that we're going to get to. Let's begin the introduction now to our specific siman, 243 Ish Mem Gimel, which again is focusing specific. We spoke about a lot of things right now. We are going step by step. We are focusing specifically in this chapter on one case scenario, which is renting your business to a guy. Okay? We will, yes and no. We will start soon from the Mechaber, yes. A general introduction of the halachic issues involved in the cases, all the things I just mentioned, as well as this case in the siman, which is renting your business to a guy. So we actually have 4 possible prohibitions, independent of each other, which can be transgressed in the process of doing business or having a business open, etc. And obviously, for it to be allowed, all 4 must be negated. So it's not enough for someone to learn well one of these isurim and learn, in this case, this doesn't apply. There's still another 3 that you have to negate and go through to make sure it's cleared of. So what are they? The first one is the basics, amir l'nachi, the prohibition of having a guy do your malacha on Shabbos, do malacha for you. Anything that you can't do, the guy can't do, and that is actually the introduction of the siman. It opens up with amir l'nachi, as we will learn momentarily. The second isur is the isur of schar Shabbos. The isur of schar Shabbos is irrelevant of having the guy do work for you. It's forbidden to do business on Shabbos. And it's forbidden to make money on Shabbos. These issues are scattered throughout the Shulchan Aruch. Even though this is our beginning, and I said that we have here about 6 chapters on that, it doesn't end there. We have another 10 scattered chapters throughout the Shulchan Aruch on Amir l'Nachri. Now, some of the other major simanim that discuss Amir l'Nachri are in 277, Reish Ayin Zayin through Reish Ayin Tes, 277 through 279. Then we have again in chapter 306, another major discussion of Amir l'Nachri, a lot of very important halachas, 307 actually. 307, a lot of important halachas are also discussed there. And we also have in 326, so it's really scattered, these halachas, and as I said, it is one of the most, if not the most complex subject of Hilchos Shabbos, other than the laws of Eitzah v'Achnasa, which is its own story. But within the first section of Hilchos Shabbos, it is definitely the most complex. Okay, so the second thing is Schar Shabbos, which is making money on Shabbos. And then do with a guy. Can I have, if I own soda machines, I came up with this idea of having a special coffee machine in every single shul, and I charge them, 20 agarot more than it costs me, and I'm making millions. If it's so cheap, everyone's buying, having a coffee before Shachris. And I make millions. I have mahadran without sugar, with sugar, everything, all according to halachas, everything is set up. It's a good business idea, if anyone wants. So, in any event, so can I have this open on Shabbos? What if some guy is going to come and do it? What if I have it in a mall or have it in somewhere else? So this is the issue of Schar Shabbos, making money on Shabbos, irrelevant of whether there's a guy involved in your work or not involved in your work. Another example, can I be a balkaireh? Can I be a Balkaira? Balkaira, if he's doing it for free, and of course, I don't think anyone have any complaints except for you. But if you're doing it for payment, then it's a question. How can you get paid for working on Shabbos? There's many Shabbos jobs that are available, whether religious or not religious related or not. You have Chazan is also a religious job. Many Chazanim get paid thousands of dollars to exercise the vocal cords in the Yom Niraim. And they get paid for doing that. So can I pay? About to pay if I'm paying the shofar blower. He's not doing it for free. I'm paying him a salary, a payment for the yontif.
Hashgacha at a hotel, then a
Hashgacha at a hotel, yeah. Any Shabbos work that I'm doing, I'm making money, it has nothing to do with the Mir L'Nachri. It's a different subject. It's called Schar Shabbos. The main focus of Schar Shabbos is chapter 306, 307. That's where it's mainly discussed. It's not discussed here, but because a lot of these cases involve Schar Shabbos, so the Alte Rebbe and the Mechaber, as we're going to see the Shulchan Aruch, discusses it even though it's not the main focus of the chapter. The third is Maras Ayin, and that is what it appears. We've heard of Maras Ayin. It's a big concept throughout Shulchan Aruch. In Maras Ayin, it's basically like this. While we have what's called a biblical prohibition, that's from Scripture, from the Torah, or from Torah Shabbal Peh, from the oral Torah, we have rabbinical prohibitions, which are things that the sages prohibited for whatever reason they saw fit. And then we have Maras Ayin, which is a generic name for things that are really permitted, and there's absolutely nothing wrong, and even the sages didn't decree against it, but they restricted you from doing it because what will the onlooker say? And this we see that the idea of, you have to take into account what society says about you does have truth to it. They say as a joke that until age 20, I was always worried what everybody's saying. I always thought that everyone was looking at me and thinking things about me. From age 20 to 40, I said, they're looking at me, but they're not thinking about me. And then from age 40, no one's even thinking about me. I realized that nobody really cares. But on the other hand, nonetheless, the sages did put certain restrictions called Maras Ayin of what will the onlooker say. That, unfortunately, we know that gossip is one of the highest transaction commodities available today in the human world. Probably always was, by the way, from the history that we have. We have a lot of Lashon Hara. Gossip was always big in. I just saw actually an article where they found a writing, an inscription in a very old shul that was built in the times of the Tanoim. So the inscription is written in Aramaic. It's written in Aramaic. It's like 2,000 years old here in Israel. And the inscription says in it in Aramaic that they had a takana that whoever speaks Lashon Hara in the shul, that's what they were, whoever speaks Bisha Lishna, which is Lashon Hara in the shul, they will be put in excommunication and Hashem will pay them and cut off their children and children. That's what it says. It was a curse for anyone who would speak Lashon Hara in the shul. Okay, in any event, so the question is, when did the sages enact this idea of Maras Ayin of that something you're doing may appear to be to the onlooker as something is wrong? So we have the Talmud and the Poskim, which lists specific case scenarios. Maras Ayin is not a type of prohibition or restriction where we can make up as we go along. We can't just say, well, this to me looks like Maras Ayin, so the sages decreed against Maras Ayin, and therefore, since to onlookers it may look bad, therefore halach you not do it. It may be suggested for you not to do it because still, what are people going to say about you? But on the other hand, it's not halachically forbidden because Maras Ayin is limited to the cases the sages actually mentioned. We can't create new cases of Maras Ayin. That's the idea. Well, one of the cases of Maras Ayin that the sages restricted against was regarding businesses, having business open on Shabbos, even in the permitted way. So you went through everything. No Amir L'Nachri, check. You went through all the Heterim. No Schar Shabbos, check. There's no revenue in a prohibited way. In revenue, there's a permitted way of doing it. So, all right, we're going to learn. So you check that out as well. But nonetheless, even after all that is checked out, if it's Maras Ayin, as we will learn when the sages decreed Maras Ayin, that's the focus of this chapter, 243, it would still be forbidden. And then we have a fourth subject, which is not discussed in the Shulchan Aruch per se, but it is discussed in later Achreinim. The Marsham is one of the first to discuss this. He was a student of the Chassam Sefer, and that is with Moshe Shik, and that is regarding Lifnei Iver. The concept that, unfortunately, we have a lot of non-religious Jews, and even if you went through all the Heterim of Amir L'Nachri, Schar Shabbos, and Maras Ayin, if a Jew may partake in this business on Shabbos, he may purchase from this business on Shabbos, so you're causing him to stumble, and that enters into a totally new question of this generation that was not around back then. It wasn't around. It didn't exist. There was no such thing as Jews having the audacity to do business on Shabbos. Nobody would do business on Shabbos. Even if you weren't from, you kept it in your home. You didn't do it publicly. Unfortunately, this has become the shilas over the last 200 years, 150 years, where this has become abundant in practice. Okay. With that introduction, we are now ready to dive into the actual text. Being that this siman opens up the whole law of Amir L'Nachri, so in the Alte Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, he gives us an entire, very well written and organized introduction to Amir L'Nachri, which is not found in the Shulchan Aruch of the Mechaber. The Mishnah Berurah likewise goes into it, similar to the Alte Rebbe. They give a whole introduction to the general concept of Amir L'Nachri, and then after all that, we're going to get to the specific case scenario here of renting your business to a guy. Okay, so let us begin with Amir L'Nachri, and Alte Rebbe here, we're going to read it inside, explains the following. He's going to explain to us the source and reasons behind this prohibition of Amir L'Nachri. Why is it prohibited? What is the essence of the prohibition? It splits into three parts, as we will see. It itself has three subcategories. And then I'm going to review with you a number of cases of Aterim that we should keep in mind whenever we deal with it, which are scattered throughout the Shulchan Aruch. So let's begin. We're in Siman Reish Mem Gimel Sef Aleph in the Alte Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. Asru Chachamim. The Gemara brings in Masechah Shabbos, page 150a, that the sages prohibited one Leimar L'Nachri Laseis Lanu Malacha b'Shabbos, to tell a Gentile to do work for us on Shabbos. So as we, right off the bat, we started off, this is a rabbinical prohibition. Not everyone agrees to this. You have Rishonim who hold it's biblical. Amir L'Nachri is biblical. How is it biblical? Where in the Torah does it say a Gentile shall not do work on Shabbos? Just the opposite. As far as we know, it's Asr Min HaTorah for a Gentile to keep Shabbos. They have to break Shabbos. A guy in the process of conversion, practical directive is we tell them break Shabbos. They're not allowed to. It's biblically forbidden for them to keep Shabbos. So some learn that how would it be biblically forbidden for them to do work for us? So just like we know the Torah prohibits us from breaking Shabbos, we also know it prohibits our children from breaking Shabbos. It's not a mitzvah on our children. We are biblically prohibited from having children break Shabbos for us. We've discussed this a number of times. This is actually in chapter 343, 100 chapters later. This is discussed in Shin Mem Gimel, that it's biblically forbidden to ask a child, any Jewish child, to do malacha for you on Shabbos. That is not a rabbinical prohibition. That is a pure biblical prohibition, and it makes no difference how old they are. So people who think, well, I'm very mocked with Amir L'Nachri, but I have a 2-year-old. The 2-year-old doesn't know anything. They're a katan, shelo yagia lechinuch. They didn't know what they're doing. I'll ask them to turn on and off the light. Why do I need to get the whole fixture that they created? What was it called? The Shabbos clock, the Shabbos switch, kosher lamp, kosher switch, whatever they wanted to call it. So if I'm anyways transgressing, I'll go all the way. I'll just ask my child to do it. No, that is a biblical prohibition. To ask a Jewish child, even if he's 1 day old, just came out, just born, and it's not for his pikuach nefesh, and he's very smart and he listens already to instructions, which today we hope by teenagers or 20, 30 it happens, but let's just say in Wonderland. So it's a biblical prohibition. It doesn't matter how old the child. It's not the Isser on the child. But the child is not chayiv. He's not chayiv. Of course he's not chayiv, but you are. You're not allowed to have a Jew do a prohibition for you on Shabbos. That is an Isser deraisa. So too, there's an Isser deraisa to have your slave, an Eved Kanani. If I have a slave, all right, an Eved Kanani, it's a biblical prohibition for him to do malacha for me. My Eved has to keep Shabbos. Now the truth is he's not a real guy because a real Eved Kanani had to convert. He's like halfway Jewish. He's half Jew. When he gets freed, emancipated, then he receives a full conversion. So it's not exactly the same where we have precedent here regarding guy, but nonetheless, they learn similarly this approach, this opinion in Rishonim, that just like we find the biblical prohibition regarding having a child or your slave or maidservant, shivcha, kananis, do work for you on Shabbos, so to any guy. And they learn this from the pasuk which says, Kol melacha lo yaseh, all work you shall not do. Now they use a vowelization to read it, not kol malacha lo yaseh, but kol malacha lo ye'aseh, which means all work should not be done on your behalf. You shouldn't arrange work to be done. And that's from Scripture. So they learn that this is an actual biblical prohibition. However, we do not rule like this opinion, neither the Rambam or the majority of the Rishonim or the Shulchan Aruch, and as we see clearly here from the Alte Rebbe, this opinion is extinct. It's halacha v'lei l'maisa. We do not paskin like it, and rather we treat Amir l'nachri as rabbinical, and therefore, as we will learn, there are a number of circumventing avenues of how to avoid Amir l'nachri. And that's all because it's rabbinical. So let's continue. Bein bechinam bein b'schar. This rabbinical prohibition of having a Gentile do work for you applies whether you are paying him, so to say, what's called a Shabbos guy. He receives a monthly salary from the community council to be the local Shabbos guy, or he collects money from every individual that he helps, as is common today to be done. Some communities have, as I said, they give a monthly stipend to the worker, and some have that each person on their own, every person who used them has to pay him after Shabbos. Whatever the system is, it doesn't matter if you're paying him or it's being done for free, it's not allowed to be done. Now, which one of these cases would I think should be more mutter? If he's doing it for free or if he's getting paid? He's getting paid. Why?
Because it's in his benefit.
Oh, when he's getting paid, I can argue and say, hey, he's doing it for himself. He's not doing me any favor. He's trying to make money. He's making money. He's doing this for his own benefit. Is a guy on Shabbos allowed to do business? Of course. A guy doesn't have to keep Shabbos. So he's doing business. He's not doing it for me. He's doing it for himself. At the same time, he is physically doing it for you. Physically. I understand his motivation. It's nothing to do with you. It has to do with your money, as is usually the relationship between wealthy men and those that are trying to get them to invest. But in any event, so in this case, we still view it, the Chachamim made the decree even in such a case that he's doing it for himself, because nonetheless he is providing you a service that's prohibited for you to do on Shabbos, so there's no difference. We will see in other case scenarios, especially in this chapter in Reish Mem Gimel, that in a case where he's not directly doing a malacha for you, and he receives, and he's doing it for his own benefit, he's doing adaita denafshi, as the wording is, for his own benefit of making money, that our cases we will use that argument to permit it, but not in a case where he's actually doing a service you requested from him that you cannot do on Shabbos. If he's washing my dishes, then I can wash my dishes also on Shabbos. That's not a problem. So I'm allowed to pay him after Shabbos for having washed my dishes on Shabbos. That's not Amir l'nachri, right? The Isser is to ask him to do a malacha. We said a malacha, meaning a Shabbos prohibition. If it's not a Shabbos prohibition, then obviously he is allowed to do it. Furthermore, as the Alte Rebbe, that even if you requested from the Gentile before Shabbos, said, okay, I'm being very machmir, I don't talk to the guy at all on Shabbos about doing work for me, everything's arranged before Shabbos. We have the whole list of things that he's going to do for me on Shabbos, all these malachas. No, even so the sages decreed. It has nothing to do with when you instructed him, it has to do with it getting done. So if it's getting done on Shabbos, it is forbidden. A further point in the restriction, this prohibition applies even if you actually don't even need this done for you on Shabbos. You just need it done whenever. So you're telling him, please, can you please go ahead and iron my shirt? And he's in my house, and he takes the iron and irons my shirt. He says, I don't need it done today. It's still usher. In a case that he's doing the malacha due to your request, even if you don't need the malacha for done on Shabbos, it is still usher for it to be done. We will learn in certain scenarios that if I don't mention anything about Shabbos and it's not inside my home, then we will learn certain scenarios that it's permitted because the Isser of Amir l'nachri. For example, if I tell a guy before Shabbos, can you iron my shirt on Sunday? Obviously there's no prohibition, even though Shabbos is in the middle, because I commanded him before Shabbos, and even on Shabbos, if I told him, can you iron my shirt for me on Sunday? Then that would be an Isser of Daber Dover, would not be an Isser of Amir l'nachri. It's still Isser, but it's a different Isser. As discussed in chapter 306. So, 307. So, in a case where you don't need it for Shabbos, but it was understood from your request that you want it done now, or it's being done in your home, we prohibit that. Now, the Alte Rebbe is going to bring us 2/3 reasons of why it's forbidden. Okay? Why do the sages pick on this? I mean, let's just leave it biblical. It's great. The guy can do for you whatever you need to get done on Shabbos, so you get to rest. The guy does all the work. And you can still have all the effects of whatever you know. You don't have to worry about bayra, you don't have to worry about muktzah, you don't have to worry about any of these things, because the guy turn on the light, off the light, you don't need a Shabbos clock, you don't have to pay expensive bills to the electricity company. Why do the Chachamim chase away this, as we said earlier, biblical allowance of having a guy? So there's a few reasons. First reason, the first and main reason the Alte Rebbe here mentions is that the guy, when you ask him to do something for you, he's your shliach. Or when he's doing something on your behalf, he is your shliach. Now, in Judaism, shlichus, a person who is someone's emissary, is considered, to a certain respect, in your flesh and blood. Meaning you're considered, to a certain extent, as if you have been entered and placed into his body. So it's as if it's as if you're doing it when he's doing it. So even though it's a different human being, but since he's doing it for me, there's this rope of connection that we view that when he does, as if you do it. This concept of shlichus we find in many different instances. We know that the halacha is that a person who marries a woman has to marry her directly. If one of you get up and decide that you found a very nice shidduch for someone you know, and you went over to the girl and say, Arayat Mekudeshes to that guy with this tabas, and you never spoke to anyone, you didn't speak to him, he doesn't know anything about this, and I've just married you off to someone. Does that work? Of course it doesn't work. Who are you? You can't marry someone against their will. You can't marry someone without their consent. You have to ask permission. But if you ask permission, according to Torah, we don't say, hey, it's a different person. He has to personally show up and give the ring. No, he's allowed to send an emissary, and the emissary can give her the ring, and so too she can send an emissary and get the ring. We mentioned before, you can have an interesting Jewish halachic chuppah where under the chuppah is the emissary of the kala and the emissary of the chassan. And they're enjoying life somewhere else. Yes, you can. It's mutter. It's halachically, it's a marriage. Okay? Because she is her shliach, he is his shliach. They both consent. It's called power of attorney. I think all business agreements work with power of attorney. If the attorneys agree, you can't then afterwards come to court and say, hey, it was my attorney, not me. My attorney's the one that made that decision. No, when you sign on a power of attorney, you have to be very careful what you sign, because sometimes you may be giving him, right? You can tell us that. You may be giving him more powers than you actually intended on, and he can make decisions that you don't like, and in court you will not have any argument, unless it's malpractice, right? But otherwise, there's a very large amount of space that the lawyer has to work with, and it's the same idea. We view this person as if it's you. Shluchei shel adam kimaisei. Now, there's one problem with this whole pilpul we just said, of how your emissary, the Torah says, is considered like actually you. So when he does the mitzvah, it's like you're doing the mitzvah, and it's effective. So to here, when he's doing the malach on your behalf under your instructions, as if you're doing the malacha, there's a concept called shlucha shel an kamaisei kamaya mishaleach ve'ein nachri nasa shliach. And in the rules, which are, by the way, brought in the Gemara and Kedushin, that's where these rules are brought regarding marriage, and from there it's learned to everything else. Actually, in the Torah, it's brought regarding Truma, but in the Mishnah, it's brought regarding marriage. Whatever. In any event, so from there, it says, the Gemara there in Kedushin says that this only works for someone who is similar to the Mishalech, meaning we're both Jewish. We're both obligated in the commands. I'm obligated. He is obligated to marry a woman. I'm obligated to marry a woman. So he can then be my representative, and he can be my shoes, my personal shliach to hand it over. However, a Gentile who is not chayiv, he's not part of the Tayyag mitzvahs of getting married, he cannot be my shliach. So if I send a guy to give the ring to the kala, then it's worthless.
There's a difference between a power of attorney and an agent. Power of attorney is a document. The person who has it is limited to the four corners of the document. The agent doesn't have to be in writing, and the agent is the representative. The question comes, what is the scope of his agency? It may be broader than the person giving it may have intended, and there are all questions about intention or not.
Interesting. So well, tell us, if I send an agent, not a power of attorney, I think the person who sent him will have the right to say, I never agreed to that, no? I mean, if there was no signature, right, we don't have any legal way of proving.
Apparent authority.
Right. But in halacha, good point you're bringing out for legal purposes, but in halacha, a shliach is a power of attorney. In halacha, the same way for the legal world, when you sign that power of attorney document, you are held liable to the decisions that your attorney makes for you based on the conformant of that document. So when you appoint a shliach, even orally, no document was signed, he can do for you in that area that you appointed him. He has very broad authority to do for you within that area. And you can't come later and cry and say, well, I never intended. I mean, it depends. There are cases where we say he overstepped what you sent, but what the intent was is a concept called a shliach is only there to benefit you, not to cause you damage. So if you went ahead and did something which is viewed in a court of law as considered damaging to his sender, then we would say, oh, he's not a shliach regarding that. We would nullify his power of attorney. But nonetheless, this idea is even orally, and the whole idea of that you need a kinyan when you make a shliach is just for formality purposes and for purpose of having some kind of evidence. But in truth, a shliach is appointed orally, regardless of whether he was formally signed upon or whatever. So getting back to this, so we have this question, and well, a guy cannot be a Jewish shliach, so it's perfect. And that's why, by the way, biblically, we do rule that a guy can do malacha for you on Shabbos, because even if I'm telling him he's my shliach, ain't shliach, a guy cannot be a shliach for a Jew. He's not in the pants of the Jew. The Jew doesn't enter the pants of the guy when he's doing it. So it works out perfectly. However, here the Alte Rebbe says that rabbinically the sages considered it that a guy can become a shliach for a Jew lechumra, meaning to be machmir, then a guy can become a Jew, can become a shliach for a Jew. Another for machmir, for purposes that it would be machmir in halacha. Let's read inside. Even though we don't say, even though biblically we do not say that a person can become another person's shliach unless he is a Jew, other than a Jew becoming a shliach for a Jew. It says regarding Hafrashas Truma, by tithing fruits and produce, so to Gam, you also shall tithe the tithing of God, and the sages, the sages in Maseches Kedushin, learn from there. Gam, the word also is coming to include Rabbi Shluchachem, the person shliach. That Mikan Shluchachem K'maiseh. From here we learn that even though the Torah requires the actual owner to do the tithing, from here we learn that a shliach is considered as if he is the actual owner when he was appointed to do so. However, we also learn Ma'atem B'nai Bris, just like you are B'nai Bris. B'nai Bris is a term going on Jewish, you're a Jew. After L'chach, so too legally, the shliach is only legally considered you if he is also Jewish. Aval Anachri, but the Gentile, Eina B'Torah Shlichus Min does not receive a biblical shlichus status. Nonetheless, rabbinically, we do attend the concept of shlichus even to a guy to be machmer. This concept is not limited to Hilchos Shabbos. It's all Taryag mitzvahs. All the 613 commands have this restriction that when to appoint a Gentile to do the Aveira for you, to do the sin for the transgression for you, is rabbinically forbidden due to Amir L'Nachri. Where else is this discussed? We find this discussed in chapter 5 in Even Ezer regarding neutering an animal. A lot of people own pets, especially dogs, and sometimes, according to the laws of the land, you have to get it neutered. They will not allow you to own an unneutered dog because of various different issues that come up. So you say, okay, I'll bring it to the vet. The vet's a guy. The guy am I going to do it. I know it's a biblical prohibition, to neuter a dog, to mutilate his reproductive organs, but if it's a guy doing it, it should be allowed. The answer is absolutely forbidden. First of all, there are Poskim who hold even a guy is prohibited from doing so, from castration. Some Poskim hold even Goyim, it's included as one of the negative commands of the 7 Noahidite laws. They're not allowed to neuter, they're not allowed to castrate an animal. But even if we were told that it is permitted for a guy to do it on his own animals, he cannot be your shliach to do so. It's absolutely forbidden, and in such a case, we have to do a chemical sterilization and not an actual mutilation of the animal, even if it's a guy doing it.
Even if you sell the animal to the guy?
Correct. The Shulchan Aruch there in Even Ezra discusses that even when you sell it to a guy, we suspect that he's going to neuter it, and it ended up that you caused it to be neutered. So if you live in a state, in a country, in a municipality, they require all dogs must be neutered, then you're entering into trouble, because if you want to then sell it, he will have to neuter it, unless, once again, they have chemical sterilization. It's a lot more expensive, but that's what a Jew will have to do according to Allah. It's absolutely forbidden to do physical mutilation of the organs.
You couldn't sell it to a Jew who wouldn't be holding the halach either, then, right?
Absolutely not. Correct. Yeah. Okay, when we get to Even Ezra chapter 5, we'll discuss this in greater depth. But that's another case example which is discussed, and this is in the whole Torah. Goyim cannot do sins on behalf of Jews in the whole Torah, not just Hilchos Shabbos. Hilchos Shabbos got the most discussion of this idea of a Amir Nachri, but it's a concept throughout Halacha. Continuing, the Alte Rebbe says, the Yesh Remez L'Isser, this prohibition, which we just said is due to the reason of Shlichus, is hinted to in the Torah, in Scripture, and there he uses what I said earlier, the pasuk I brought earlier, in the biblical opinion. He says like this: the hint to this prohibition of Amir L'Nachri on Shabbos and Yantiv in Scripture is because it says regarding Yantiv, Kol Malacha Ya'asa Behem, no work shall be done during those days. Mashma Fila Aidechem, we read the word Ya'asa as not Yaseh Be'ya'asa, that it gets done even through other people. She'ein Metzuvan Ala Shvisa B'Yantiv, even people aren't commanded to rest on Yantiv. It's forbidden to have them do it for you. V'kal v'chem on Shabbos. If it's forbidden on Yantiv, then certainly on Shabbos. Even though the Alte Rebbe brings the teaching of the strict approach that it's biblical, he says, in truth, this is just a support in Scripture, and it is not an actual, real tradition or oral learning from this verse. This is a concept we find a lot in Divrei Chachamim, that in difficult rabbinical decrees, they bring a verse to support the decree, and it's not to teach us that it's actually based on Scripture. Because even the Chachamim, even in times of smicha, real smicha, where they had ability to be expound in the Torah with the 13 midas HaTorah Nedeshbem, which say every morning the 13 Torah rules. It wasn't a free-for-all that everyone can just come up and do it and play the games with the rules and come up with new laws. It wasn't that way at all. It was tradition. You had to have certain tradition that there was room to make this deduction. There was room to make this teaching. And so even if we find a hint, we find a drasha in the words Kol Malacha Ya'aseh, that doesn't necessarily mean it's biblical if we don't have the tradition that is the correct interpretation. And that's the way we rule. We rule that it in truth is not biblical, it's just a support. Obviously, when a rabbinical decree receives a support in Scripture, it's strengthened. The decree is a lot more sourced or stronger, or has a greater voice than a regular plain decree that doesn't have any source in Scripture, but nonetheless it still remains under the category of an Isser de Rabbanan and an Isser de Oraisa. The Iker. Now the Alte Rebbe gives us a third reason. And these are all reasons brought down in different Rishonim. You see how the Alte Rebbe beautifully coalesces it all together. Like he's taking a whole bunch of different strings of different threads of different material and putting it together into one garment. So we have here what sounds like, before the Alte Rebbe, big machlekes. He holds this reason, he holds that reason. Here we're going to see how it all comes together beautifully. The first reason is the reason of the Rambam, that is that a shliach. He's your shliach. The Alte Rebbe says, then we have another reason, which is, it says Kol Malacha L'Yaseh, says the Alte Rebbe, that is the support for this concept. It's just a scriptural support for the concept of not having a guy do malacha for you. And now we're going to learn the reason why the sages accredited shlichus status to the Gentile and looked for a support. So this is the third reason brought down. And as he said, this is the main thing. The Iker, ha'isr, amir l'nachim shazim yantiv, the main cause or reason that the sages prohibited asking them to do things for you on Shabbos and Yantiv. The whole reason is so Shabbos is not light in the eyes of people. They'll come to do it themselves. If it was permitted, as it is biblically, to have a guy do malacha for you, so you're so used to breaking Shabbos through the guy. So if it was allowed to do, so basically, psychologically, we don't really see that we don't turn on computers on Shabbos because the guy's turning it on. We don't see that we don't drive on Shabbos because the guy is driving us. So it's actually just like a weekday, just having the guy do the work for us. And this would make Shabbos be almost similar to a weekday, and it will be very light in our eyes, and the idea of Chil Shabbos would not be, just let's go back, let's imagine if this were the case. The guy was literally doing everything we do during the week, he had a guy doing for us on Shabbos. It wouldn't be Shabbos-like. It would feel like it's a regular weekday. And it's not just the feeling that it's not Shabbos, but that would cause people, Shabbos is not so severe. Look, anyways, it wasn't even the guy doing it, you're doing it. Even though halachically would be a big difference, but nonetheless, that's why the sages put a stop to this, so Shabbos would not be light in people's eyes. The same thing applies on Yantiv, there's an Isser Milanach. Even Cholamayid, there's an Isser having a guy do work for you. Anything that's forbidden in Cholamayid is likewise also for a Gentile to do on your behalf. And so too with any other biblical, any other Isser that Torah prohibited, it is likewise prohibited for a Gentile to do for you without any difference. As we said, this is not limited to Hilchos Shabbos. It is everywhere. We're going to do one more sif over here and conclude. The sages, sometimes the fligu can mean exaggerated, but that's a derogatory term. They basically broadened this prohibition of Amir al-Nachri and made decrees upon decrees about it. Usually there's a concept, we don't make decree upon decree. Once the sages make one decree, it stays there. We don't make a decree to protect the decree to protect the decree. That makes no sense. But in this case, Amir al-Nachri was so severe that they did do that. They put layers of decrees upon the decrees upon the decrees to make it, to make a guard railing so you shouldn't eventually come to a Amir al-Nachri. Such as, for example, the main issue is to ask the guy to do something for you. But an additional decree they made is if the guy went ahead and did it for you even on his own, you didn't say a word. He went over and he cooked for you your cholent on Shabbos. He heard that in the skin. His plata went off. He didn't cook. He went in the apartment in the middle of the night. He turned on the fire, put the cholent. You wake up in the morning, you're smelling fresh cholent. Lo and behold, the guy did it for you. You didn't ask him a word. You had no idea. Nonetheless, it's usher on Shabbos to benefit from it because he did the malacha for you. So even though this doesn't directly transgress the original decree against telling the guy, didn't tell him anything, they made a decree upon the decree and they forbade and fined the item to which the malacha was done that you cannot benefit from it on Shabbos. And even once you have to wait until it is ready to be prepared. Mishum Shabbos, due to the decree that if we allowed you to benefit from it on Shabbos, maybe you would tell him to do it on Shabbos.
But in that case, it'd be forbidden during the week too. It'd be bishalakum.
Well, this is a very special cholent. It has fake meat that can be eaten in its raw state. And, okay, you got me. You got me.
It's just theoretical.
It was a low flame, and he turned it higher. Better.
So you can't do anything. Like if your shul didn't have the heat wasn't on, your shul. And even if you don't have
next week, Emirat Hashem, this week I was just trying to impress upon you the severity of the Isser, but next week we will, Emirat Hashem, review the 8 exceptions, the 8 circumventing roads, and that's the job of a Rav. The job of a Rav is to know the windy roads, the back roads around.
All right, but I need to know this before Shabbos.
Next week.
Don't do anything wrong.
I'm just have fear.